Hey guys, welcome back to more Malicious Compliance relationship Reddit stories. In this Ripe Stories video, my wife cheated, filed for divorce and demanded half of everything I owned. I agreed immediately, but what she didn't realize was that everything I owned was legally worth almost nothing. Let's dive right into the story. And the first one is titled r/MaliciousCompliance, wife cheated and divorced me, demands half of everything, and I comply. So my wife and I met about 7 years ago. Things were good at first, genuinely good. She was the kind of person who always seemed like she had her life together, ambitious, social, always the center of attention at any gathering. I'm more of a background guy. I work in IT infrastructure and I like things orderly and documented, and I've always believed the best way to protect yourself is to be thorough before a problem even starts. That mindset ended up saving me, but I will get to that later. So we dated for about 1.5 years before I proposed, and she said yes, we got married, and for the first couple of years things were fine. Not perfect, but fine. We lived in an apartment I'd been in before we even met, and then when we talked about buying a house, she wanted something big and impressive. I was more conservative about it, wanted to stay within budget, but she pushed and I gave in more than I should have, and we ended up with a house that was more her vision than mine. Looking back, that was the pattern of our whole marriage really. As time went on, small cracks started showing. She would come home later than expected, and eventually late became expected. Essentially, she started keeping her phone face down on every surface, taking calls in another room, getting weird and tense if I walked in while she was texting, and I told myself I was just overthinking it. We didn't have kids together, we had talked about it but never got there. Always something to do first, always the wrong time. In hindsight, I think she knew where things were heading long before I did. Now here's the part that matters for the backstory, because it's the whole reason this story ends the way it does. Before we were even engaged, I had a conversation with my mom that changed how I handled my finances going forward. My mom is practical in a way that only comes from growing up somewhere economically unstable. She did not lecture me or warn me about my girlfriend specifically. She just sat me down one evening and said something along the lines of, "You work hard, make sure what you build stays yours, no matter what happens." She had watched people in our extended family go through ugly divorces and walk away with almost nothing after years of building something together. It was not a prediction, it was just a perspective she had, and I took it seriously. So I spent some time with a financial advisor and then with a family law attorney, not because I distrusted anyone, just because I wanted to understand how things really worked. And what I learned was that in our state, marital assets are generally defined as what you acquired during the marriage that is titled in your name. Assets you owned before the marriage or assets held in someone else's name sit outside of that in most circumstances. I won't get into the full legal weeds because I would bore everyone, and honestly, even after 2 consultations I was still fuzzy on parts of it. The practical takeaway is this: I started directing the bulk of my savings into an account my mother was the named owner of. A properly set up, documented financial arrangement where she held the account and I contributed to it regularly. I kept a personal checking account in my own name with enough to handle my share of living expenses, my car payment and everyday spending. Everything I saved beyond that went to her. My mother was hesitant about it at first. She did not love the idea of holding money that she saw as mine. However, I explained my reasoning and she came around. We made it official and documented properly with help from the attorney. My wife knew that I sent money to my mother regularly. She knew that there was a financial arrangement there. She assumed it was because my mom was older, on a limited income, and needed help, which was partially true. She never pushed for more details though, and I never gave more than she asked for. As far as my wife was concerned, I was just a dutiful son helping his mother out. She even said once that it was sweet. Anyway, back to what actually happened. About 9 months ago, I noticed the Govee lights in our bedroom acting strange. By the way guys, Govee lights, if you don't know, are these RGB lights you can install in your room. If you're not familiar, Govee makes these LED strip lights and bulbs that you control through an app. We had them set up in the living room, the bedroom and my home office, and I'd set them up and I was the one who managed the app and configured everything. I had the bedroom lights set to a specific schedule, a bright cool white during the day that would step down in the evening, simple, consistent and automatic. So one evening I opened the Govee app to check something and I noticed the bedroom lights are set to a completely different scene than the one I programmed. Not the cool white schedule I'd set up, a dim, warm amber. The kind of setting you would pick if you wanted the room to feel a certain way. I figured maybe there had been a firmware update that wiped the schedule, or maybe I had bumped something, so I reset it and didn't think much more about it that night. But then it happened again and again. A few weeks later I started paying closer attention and I went into the app's scene history and scheduling to try to understand what was overriding my settings. What I noticed was that my schedule was actually intact and correct, but someone was manually activating a different scene from inside the Govee app. My wife had access to the app too because we had set everything up together. She knew how to use it. What I started clocking was the timing. The manual overrides were happening on Tuesday and Thursday afternoons consistently while I was at work. My wife worked hybrid, into the office on Monday, Wednesday and Friday, and Tuesdays and Thursdays she was supposedly home working. So her being on the Govee app mid-afternoon was not impossible on its face. But why would you stop in the middle of a workday to switch the bedroom lights from bright daylight mode to a dim warm glow? And why was it so consistent? The same days, roughly the same time window, and every week for at least 6 weeks when I looked back through the history, I sat with that for a while. I'm not really someone who jumps to conclusions quickly, but I'm also someone who works in IT and pays attention to patterns, and this pattern was strange enough that I started thinking about what else I could check. We had a basic security cam at the front door and one covering the backyard. I started pulling up the footage from Tuesdays and Thursdays going back a few weeks, and I don't want to get into detail about what exactly I found, because it's not the point of this post, but I will say what I saw on that footage was enough, and it was intense and heartbreaking. There was a car that showed up on those afternoons parked a street over, but catchable from the right angle, and someone was coming into my house on those days, someone I'd never seen before. Not a friend of hers that I recognized, no context for why this person would be there. I closed the laptop and sat in my home office for probably an hour without moving. Then I started working. Over the next 3 days I pulled everything I could find, I exported what I had from the Govee app, and I went through weeks of camera footage and saved the relevant clips. We were on a shared phone plan and I had access to the account online, so I went through the call logs, not messages, just a log of calls and data, and found a number that showed up constantly on those same days. I did not call it, I didn't need to. I saved everything to an encrypted external drive and sent copies to a personal email account my wife didn't know existed, and then I called an attorney. I found someone with experience, specifically in family law, and sat down with her to lay out the whole picture, what I had, what I suspected, and most importantly, the financial structure that I'd been running for years. I walked her through the arrangement with my mom, the documented history of contributions, the fact that it predated our marriage by a couple years and had continued all the way through. She asked a lot of questions and reviewed what I brought. Her assessment was straightforward. What mattered in our state was what was titled in my name. My mother's account was my mother's account. The contributions I had made to it over the years were gifts, documented as such, and what I personally owned was my car, which I had had before we ever met, and the balance in my personal checking account, which was typically a couple $1,000s. And that was essentially it. She told me to keep quiet, keep documenting, and let things develop on their own. So I did. I went to work, I came home, I acted normal, I kept a running log of dates and what I observed. Nothing dramatic really, just notes. I did that for weeks, and then one Sunday evening my wife told me she wanted a divorce. She said she was not happy, that we had grown apart, that she needed something different, that she was calm about it, almost rehearsed. She didn't mention anyone else. She said she had already spoken to an attorney and that she expected things to be divided fairly, half of everything. And I told her I was sorry to hear that and that I wanted to cooperate. I went to my attorney the following morning, we started the process. And here's where the malicious compliance comes in, because her demand was simple and specific. Half of everything I owned. Okay. Half of my car, which had about 140,000 miles on it and was worth maybe $3,000 on a good day, that's $1,500. Half of my personal checking account, which had about $2,000 in it at that point. That is $1,000. Half of whatever value could be assigned to my old work laptop and some office furniture, and some of the shared household furniture would get split or sold and divided, and that was it. That was everything I owned, because everything else, the savings I'd been building for years, the investment contributions, the retirement accounts, all of it, sat in my mother's name. Legally, it was not mine. I didn't own it. You cannot take half of what someone does not own. My attorney filed the response to her petition, her attorney came back quickly asking for detailed financial disclosures, and my attorney provided everything, completely, accurately, every account in my name, every asset in my name, every liability in my name, my mother's accounts were my mother's accounts, and the paper trail going back years was clear and consistent. This arrangement was not invented the week she filed for divorce, it was documented going back to before we were even married. Her attorney then started pushing on the house, and that became the main battleground. The argument was that the house was marital property purchased during the marriage and that she was entitled to a significant share of whatever equity had built up. And my attorney's response addressed two things. First, the down payment. My contribution to the down payment had come from a documented gift from my mom, not from any account in my name. Second, the equity question. The house had appreciated modestly, but we had also done a refinance partway through, pulled some cash out for renovations she had pushed for, and the remaining mortgage balance was substantial. My attorney had an expert run through the numbers. After accounting for the mortgage payoff, realtor fees, and the cash-out refinance that had gone almost entirely towards things she had wanted, the net equity in the house came out to somewhere around $9,000. Split that however you want, there's nothing there worth fighting over. Her attorney also raised the argument of marital asset dissipation, claiming I'd been systematically draining the marital estate by sending money to my mom, and my attorney handled that one pretty efficiently. Dissipation refers to wasting marital assets, typically through gambling, spending on an affair, that kind of thing. What I had done was a pre-existing documented financial arrangement that had started before the marriage and continued consistently throughout. There was no sudden change in behavior, no suspicious spike in transfers, just years of clean, consistent records showing exactly what the arrangement was and had always been. Her attorney had nowhere to go. There was a full financial disclosure process as part of discovery, and my attorney handed over everything requested and everything checked out. The numbers were what they were, she kept looking for angles and my attorney kept responding with documentation, and eventually there was nothing left to find because there was nothing hidden, everything was exactly as stated. Her side eventually came back to the table for settlement discussions. She got her car, her personal bank accounts, her personal belongings and the furniture she wanted. The house was listed, sold, and after the mortgage was paid off and the fees were covered, there was about $9,000 left. Her attorney managed to negotiate a share of that. She got $3,000, I got $6,000, $3,000 plus $1,000 from my checking account. That was the grand total of what my wife walked away with from a marriage where she assumed she was about to receive a very different outcome. She had watched us go on vacations, eat at good restaurants, live in a house she had picked. She had assumed all of that reflected money sitting somewhere in my accounts, but it didn't. We lived the way we did because I earned a decent income, not because I was accumulating wealth in my own name. The wealth I was accumulating existed, it just was not mine on paper. She wanted half of everything I owned, and I gave her half of everything I owned. Half of almost nothing is almost nothing. The divorce was finalized a few months ago. I'm in a smaller place now, which is genuinely fine. It's quieter, and I've adjusted to how I handle my finances going forward because the structure that served its purpose doesn't need to stay exactly the same forever. My mom has been good through all of this. She offered several times during the process to just put the money back in my name to simplify things, and I told her no, that was not the point. The structure existed for a reason, and the reason had just proved itself. For anyone earlier in their relationship reading this, I'm not saying run out and transfer everything to your parents. I'm not saying assume the worst about your partner. I'm just saying know your own financial and legal situation before something goes wrong. Talk to an attorney and talk to a financial advisor. Understand how things are structured and what your options are, not because you're paranoid, but just because you are prepared. I'm doing well now, better than I expected to, honestly. And yeah guys, let me know in the comments what you think about this story. Do you think OP did the right thing, or was he an a-hole for doing this? There have been some conflicting opinions actually on Reddit, but they were so outrageously stupid that I just don't want to read them out here. Either way, the next one is another super interesting malicious compliance cheating wife story, which is titled "Ex-wife tells me to take handling the kids more seriously, so I did." So for some context, I'm a happily divorced dad of 2 beautiful kids, a 5-year-old girl and almost 4-year-old son. My ex and I met in my home state of Illinois. She was a Navy brat, so her family is from Texas, and we fell in love very quickly. Got married after a year, and we're expecting my daughter after 3 months. My son followed almost 4 to 6 months after my daughter was born, and a month after he was born, I found out she was cheating on me with at least 5 guys. Later found out it was actually around 8. Obviously, I filed for divorce. I got the lawyer, changed my banking accounts and presented her with papers. The first copy was rejected for a reason I cannot even quite remember. Upon revision, I had my lawyer also change the custody from me having the kids every other weekend to every single weekend. Much to his surprise, she signed it. We shared the kids accordingly. She was super pissed, but there was nothing she could do about it. And when she/I could no longer afford to live in the state, she moved back to Texas. Fast forward 2 years without seeing the kids, couldn't afford to see them except on one Christmas. I got out of the Navy, moved back home, and I got the kids for 3 months. I was appalled by their development delays. Both kids were rated in the bottom 5% of kids their age. My daughter didn't have a clue about potty training at 3, barely speaking, and had no awareness of adult authority. My son was not even close to walking, was nonverbal, and wouldn't eat most meats and was afraid of grass. When I returned them, my daughter would listen to adults, was potty trained, and speaking in almost complete sentences. My son was walking, saying some words, hand signals, and eating a variety of different foods. I worked my butt off to get them there and also spent a lot on 2 times a week therapy for both of the kiddos, money well spent by the way. Anyway though, I stayed in Illinois for about 1.5 to 2 years, gathering up enough money to move to Texas. I had a little amount saved, but I started dating a girl who I came to find out was also wanting to move to Texas, so we pooled our money together and moved down. Almost done with the background, guys, so we got down to Texas and lived out of hotels for around a month, found jobs, found a place and moved in, and I worked in a sales position in a large bulk-type store, and my girlfriend works at a sandwich place. At this time, my ex and I are not going by the divorce decree custody days because of convenience, and well, a person ended up quitting the job and I had to take their hours, so my girlfriend got permission to bring my kids to her work. The GM loves them. Well, they were being toddlers and she texted a mutual friend of my ex and me asking if she could watch the kids for a few hours. That got sent to my ex and new hubby got pissed and they came to my work and chewed me out saying that I need to take the kids' well-being more seriously. Roger that. Now I realize I messed up that day. I was not mad at what they said, I was just pissed at the fact that they did that in front of my trainee, a customer and co-workers. During my setup phase, I was not paying my full child support, which was kind of them, but that ended because I was now taking things more seriously. The next morning I talked to my boss, told him what happened, and informed him that I could not work at the time specified on my divorce decree because now that I'm taking things seriously, I will now have the kids every weekend. I then transferred my ex the remainder of child support, informed her that she was right and I needed to take things more seriously. So I will be by after work to pick the kids up after work for my court-appointed custody. She was confused but agreed, and then I called her on Friday evening to see if she has everything prepared for the weekend stay, aka medications for my son, and she flipped out saying that they have plans all day Saturday and church Sunday morning. She screamed at me saying, "Why are you making these demands all of a sudden?" I said, "Well, I'm just taking the kids and our agreements more seriously like you demanded." I ended up letting them have the kids Saturday and pick them up Sunday morning. I then informed my ex and hubby that we would need at least a week's notice for any change in plans on weekends in case we had things planned. Generally, if they wanted to do something special with the kids if we didn't have plans, even at the last minute. Since I was taking things more seriously now, my GF and I kept very meticulous records of any injury, diaper rash, rash on my daughter from not wiping correctly, and physical appearance upon pickup. We would treat said rashes, note any changes in our little black book, and then take a photo of the pages with a timestamp. When they returned, we would then note any worsening of any rash, injury, or non-treatment, and we also signed the kids up for more therapy, since they are still very much behind. So this went on for a few months until, surprise, my ex had enough and brought me to court to force the changes she wanted. I presented the judge with everything: the doctor notes I had from day one, the doctor notes from my ex with conflicting info. These notes were things she would tell the state-funded therapist for my son, as well as all the expenses for the therapies I was giving my kids. Then I showed her our notes, the printed timestamp photos, and the many times any rashes would be present or worse when we got the kids. My ex broke down into tears since she brought her entire family and several friends for support. The increase in child support she wanted was shot down, and instead was almost halved since I was making less than I was prior. The expenses I had for the kids and my overall time with the kiddos, the change in custody she so desperately wanted. Well, let me just say, the judge ordered it to stay the same with the change of alternating Sundays, slightly annoying, and walking out she asked me through tears, "How could you do this to me?" To which I replied, I was taking things with the kids seriously. Edit to give some context, I've never restricted my ex from the kids. If she wants to have them for whatever reason and I have no plans, I let her have them on my time. Edit number 2, for all you guys who are saying I neglected my kids but not seeing them for 2 years, I was in the Navy, I tried to see them but my leave kept getting denied because of medical BS. I FaceTime with them every day and I requested to say goodnight to them whenever I was able to. If you've never been in the military, it's hard to understand how hard it is to get leave. Edit number 3, for those who never had kids, been divorced or live outside the US. The moms in most states are held in a much higher position than dads, and for a dad to get anything, they have to fight tooth and nail, especially in Texas. And the next one is an amazing malicious compliance story which is titled, "If you won't ship to me because my drive is less than an hour, then I will make it in an hour." So for context, I work from home for a company that makes software for mobile devices, and of course a lot of the work I do requires having the physical devices. If I need a specific one, I would put in a request and they would ship it to me. However, recently, one of my requests to ship it was denied and I was told I would have to pick it up myself. Their reasoning: I live within an hour of the office, so I'm expected to come in to get them myself. The problem is, if you look up the drive on Google Maps, it does take under an hour, just barely, but only if you look it up at like 2 in the afternoon or in the middle of the night when no one is driving. If you look it up during normal commuting time, it is never less than that. I'm writing this at 7 AM and it's now 1:15. In 30 to 45 minutes it's gonna be even worse. Well, I asked if I could just pay for shipping myself since it would be cheaper for me to do than pay for gas and parking, but nope, gotta come in. So yeah, now I come in. I take lunch, then I head in. At 1 in the afternoon, I get what I need and immediately leave, and it takes me just under 2 hours total. Because I'm only running in for a few minutes, I can leave my car in front of the building and not have to buy parking. 2 hours that I would normally spend doing work, I'm now spending in my car. For some reason, I'm now back on the approved list for shipping. The vast majority of the comments, by the way, seem to be about mileage reimbursement. On paper, I'm hybrid, not remote, and the pickup site is the office I'm based out of, so it's a normal commute. I've never been required to travel to another state. And yeah guys, as they say, penny wise, pound foolish. Thank you for watching, I will see you again tomorrow.